want to talk to you about something I've been seeing a lot of lately, and that's a connection between narcissistic or emotional abuse and spirituality. It's also something that I have encountered myself, so it's dear to my heart. But noticing that other people have gone through the same thing is, in a way, it's comforting, but it's also eye-opening. And having explored this a little bit further, I think there are reasons why so many of us go through a spiritual awakening or a heightened spiritual experience after realizing that we've been targets of emotional abuse. So that's what we're going to explore in this video. Let's get started. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and today we're going to talk about the connection between narcissistic or other emotional abuse and spiritual awakenings or heightened spirituality. This seems to be a common trend that I've noticed and I've also experienced. So I wanted to connect with other people who have been through the same and start a conversation about it, because I think there are reasons why we're here. So the first reason why I think that experiences with manipulative, narcissistic, emotionally abusive people so often lead to spiritual awakenings is that when you're in this type of relationship, you are moving further and further from your true self. And that's not what we're here for. So in an emotionally abusive relationship, you are constantly having your ego triggered by this abuser, and that's how they keep you hanging on, and that's how they also damage your self-esteem and your sense of self-worth. That's where all the magic happens, right? I say magic, it's not magic, it's abuse. But through it all, you are building up a stronger sense of ego in yourself in response to this person who is so triggering to you, and you're just moving further and further away from your spiritual self, which is ultimately where we want to be. In this lifetime, we should make an effort, if we can, if we feel called to slowly chip away at the ego's hold on our lives. We'll never be able to get rid of it entirely. It's part of the human experience, right? But when the ego is running completely unchecked, it's narcissism. The abuse that we've endured is at the hands of somebody whose ego is running the show completely without being checked by any empathy, or maybe they have an impaired sense of empathy, right? But it's just their ego is running unchecked. For you, your ego is not running unchecked as a target of emotional abuse, but it's still problematic. And it's actually what the abuser uses against you. So I believe that is why we end up so often in a spiritual awakening in the aftermath of emotional abuse. Because if you look back and if you think about it, there's a strong connection there between your ego and the ego of that abuser. He or she is pulling your strings, but they wouldn't be able to do that if your ego wasn't getting in the way. It's kind of hard to admit that we also have ego, but everyone does, right? And it's not our fault that this happened, and it's not our fault that we had, triggers and ego, but I kind of see it as our job to identify it and just work through it whenever we're ready. It's different for everyone. And if you don't feel called to look into spirituality, if you don't feel called to begin a spiritual journey, don't do it. The purpose of this video is not to change anybody's mind or to force you to work through something you don't want to work through. It's completely, these are very, very personal things. And right now, I just want to explore the reasons why people who have chosen to do that have chosen to do that. So the second reason why I think that this type of abuse, emotional abuse, so commonly leads to a spiritual awakening is that it takes so much strength to recognize what you're in as abuse and to pull yourself out of it. So you have to really dig within, back to your true self, your soul. And sometimes that comes along with messages from your spirit guides or your higher self. It certainly did for me. And when we go far off course, there's a chance that our guides are going to gently try to nudge us back onto the right path. That is definitely what happened to me. And I'm sure that many of you have had the same experience, but not everyone. Again, these are very personal journeys, but everyone has to go through that period of strength where they're digging deep within themselves and finding the strength within to pull yourself out of that situation. And doing that brings you closer to your true self. That is something that is a tremendous act of self-love right there. And that will bring you closer to who you really are inside. And the final reason is it's a little bit deep, and for some of you it might seem a little bit out there, but just hear me out and then you can decide whether it resonates with you or not. But so often it is a highly sensitive person or an empath that gets into a relationship with a narcissist. And I believe that these relationships are a result of a soul contract. It's an agreement that we make before we come to this earth that one soul will help the other should they need help on their journey. And I know that sounds outrageous. I have a whole video about it if you want to learn more about the thought process. But the crux of it is that the type of abuse, emotional abuse, is very triggering to you personally for a reason, right? So if you look back on your relationship with that manipulative person, you can essentially pick apart all the things that you actually need to work on. Now, of course, you could also pick apart everything that the other person is doing wrong and all, whatever disorder they have, and you can do that too. But if you actually look into it and see what they're triggering in you and why you were triggered by that specific thing, you could have immense spiritual growth that can lead to a spiritual awakening. I have not seen any more effective way, faster way to get to that shadow work than to evaluate the relationship you had with an emotionally abusive person. Because it's all out on the table. Cards are all out on the table. You can see exactly what triggered you, and if you want to, you can try to figure out why. And usually it's things that happened earlier in your lifetime. It's usually relationships you had as a child that creates these deep-seated patterns that can get triggered as you get older or throughout your life until you decide to deal with them. If this resonates with you at all, watch that soul contract video, and that will explain this just a little bit further. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this entire subject of narcissistic abuse or other emotional abuse and spiritual awakening. What do you think about it? Have you had this experience personally? I want to hear about it. And if you like this video, I want to see more like it, hit subscribe and be sure to hit that notification bell so you can be notified when I post new videos. And that's it for now. We'll talk soon.